mean, why would you ask me any questions afterwards if I didn't make a few such statements? But it turns out that in at least my own inquiries, these are many of the converging elements that make up what is the movement itself. You may find in some individuals that they are not particularly convinced of Christian theology, whereas others may be deeply committed to Christian theologies. Others may be simply interested in dominion. Some are interested in progressive economics, represented by the kind of industrial development that we all applauded out of the 18th century and would like to see continue, some people think. Progressivism, you've heard me use the word now probably 5 times, and you're saying, how can it possibly be that you would use such a word in connection with things like white supremacy? Well, let me say, white supremacy is rooted in progressivism. It presupposes, if you think about it carefully, that things begin in the very most primitive form and progress to their highest form. White supremacy assumes they have reached the highest form. Okay? The idea grew out of 19th century progressivism. So, as a consequence, we find in political terms, the anti-Indian movement is a mixture of left-wing and right-wing libertarian ideologies. Now, I have given you an awful lot in this definition, but I tell you this is not a simple thing to look at. It is one of the reasons why many of you probably have never heard much about this before, because it's awfully hard to write about. I received a phone call from some of the press in town, and they had never heard of this before and wanted to talk about it, and they didn't quite know how to ask the questions. And I tried to figure out how to help them ask the questions so I could answer them. One wanted to know, since she was unable to attend the speech tonight, if I would give her the speech on the telephone so that she could write about it in advance. She was shocked to hear that there were so many things going on she'd never heard of before, that they might in some way be related to one another and might have an adverse effect on the life she would be living. Well, I was glad she called me up, and I'm glad she wrote her article, but I must say that she is not atypical. Virtually everyone I have spoken to about this subject in North America is surprised that such a thing exists as an anti-Indian movement, and that it would be even slightly of any interest to anyone, perhaps other than a few Indians, against whom there is an anti. But as I proceed through here, I'm hoping that you will come to realize that the anti-Indian movement is of profound significance to you, because as I suggested in the very beginning, if it can happen to Indian country, then there are only other people you might know who are next. Now, how is the anti-Indian movement in British Columbia a part of a wider movement, Rudy, in Canada, North America, and the Western Hemisphere? We do feel like we're soaring, don't we? We're just sort of flying up, out, and away. But you know, it's going to be important for you to fly with me if you are to get back with me to the beginning of the story. It's not a conspiracy of conscious deliberations, but a convergence of predatory ideology. Capitalism, ignorant, self-interested, and bigotry. This, oddly enough, is what we now begin to see throughout not only Canada, North America, but throughout the whole of the Western Hemisphere. And we have been seeing it since, at least in the modern period, 1975, when a series of wars began in South America, remote from all of us, and perhaps 3 inches in a newspaper. But wars nevertheless. Each of these wars was explained and described in one form or another as perhaps an ideological conflict involving something now we would all admit is not much of a threat at all, and that is communism. That someone wanted to make people into communists and other peoples wanted to make other people into Democrats. Well, that was easy enough, I suppose, for us to read and think about because it was kind of black and white. And we would always know who the winner was. It was the one who didn't win that we would notice as either the communist or the capitalist. So we would hear about things like jungle wars in Brazil. Some of you might have heard of the Yanomami people. They have some 80 villages in the jungle in the northern part of Brazil. And they have lost perhaps 10% of their population in the course of the last 10 years. Probably not significant, I suppose, in most people's minds here in Canada or in anywhere else in North America. But I can assure you, to those who are calling themselves Yanomami, it is a grave loss, because the losses they sustained, if they were equivalent to, say, New York City,